Don't have to take any.
We're recording.
Good afternoon, friends. I'm John Singley, your host. Welcome to Escambia Citizens Watch Live. Today we're going to continue our series on pedestrian safety. It's called Walking Dangerously. And for most families that I know, the safety of their children is paramount. So today we're going to look at the school's sidewalks leading to schools and from schools in neighborhoods in Escambia County. And to help us unpack that today, we've invited two fellows who know a lot about this. School Board District 1 member Kevin Adams and former Director of Transportation at the Escambia School District, Robb Doss. Gentlemen, welcome and thank you for joining with us.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I appreciate it, John. Thank you for inviting me. This has been a passion for me to try to see if we can do something with this sidewalk situation, because it's important for our kids to have a safe pathway to schools and and even riding bicycles. So, and I know Robb has been involved in this a long time.
Yeah, I picked up on this about 10 years ago, and it's not just a passion; it's something that you understand. I think at a basic level that here in this community we have some things, fundamental things that need to be taken care of all the time.
Yeah, there's nothing important than keeping the kids safe.
Right. Another reason I invited Kevin to come in today was I caught a brief he gave here recently in town, and it struck me as getting right to the heart of the matter. His brief was entitled Sidewalks to Nowhere. Kevin, tell us a little bit about the Sidewalks to Nowhere.
Yes, sir. I gave this presentation to the board and the superintendent when I recognized what kind of situation we had with just a hodgepodge of sidewalks. And if allowed, I'd like to go ahead and go through this presentation real quickly. So there's sidewalks to nowhere. Escambia County now requires sidewalks for all new construction within 2 miles of a school. So you see the new subdivisions come in, you see those sidewalks. This policy has resulted in a patchwork of sidewalks where they start, stop, then start again, as you can tell from this picture right here.
Kevin, if I can step in here.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about a new subdivision going into an area, a location, if it is built within 2 miles of a school, what you're saying is that the county says that that subdivision must also create or install sidewalks in conjunction with that construction.
That's true.
Okay.
And no matter whether it's 2 miles away from the school and it's not, it may not connect in many years to an existing sidewalk. You're right.
So you could actually have a sidewalk built in front of a new development that actually doesn't connect to a school,
Right
right?
to a school or community center or ballparks
Grocery
or
stores,
anything.
grocery
It's
stores
just a
or anything.
sidewalk to nowhere. So it's just right there, and it could be just each of these subdivisions. They may have a small footprint on the road they're on,
Mm-hmm.
or wider. So, but yeah, that's what starts this condition. But yeah, I'll go to the next one. You can see here. This is on Beulah Road. This is one that actually ends at a ditch. It's actually a little spillway that goes in there. And this is another example on Tower Ridge. Tower Ridge has a new subdivision, 1.5 miles from the middle school. It'll never connect in my lifetime probably to any school.
Mm-hmm.
You can see there, it ends right there at a private property. This is down at the Bailey, down at my southern part of the district, showing existing sidewalks in front of the school there. But then we got a new neighborhood subdivision just down the road from it, Robb, that it's not connected to nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So it will take the county to come in to provide that sidewalk, so those kids from that new subdivision will have a safe pathway to the school.
Mm-hmm.
This one is just a map showing the different FDOT districts, and then this is another example. I think this is up in District 5 that shows why it's important that we got to come up with some kind of solution for these sidewalks to nowhere. This is where I'm showing that the district currently transports elementary students 1 mile or more from the school. Middle school students are 1.5 miles or more from the school, and high school 2 miles from the school.
So before you move on from that slide, the state law, that's section 1006.23, requires that, and 1006.21
You're correct.
require that school districts or superintendents and school boards transport students who live more than what they call a reasonable walking distance. Then they define a reasonable walking distance as 2 miles.
2 miles.
So what Escambia County has done, Escambia County School District has done, is said, wait a second, 2 miles? That's crazy.
For an elementary
Especially
school
for
kid,
elementary
yes.
school kids
Mhm.
and middle school kids. So here in Escambia County, we've improved that, or I say we, I was in the school district for a while, but we changed that locally, or set different parameters locally, so that we would transport students who lived, elementary school students who lived within a mile, and middle school students who lived within a mile and a half.
Yes. And we've even gone above that, because like at Beulah Middle School, where we have no infrastructure at all, we're actually taking buses directly across the road from the school, picking up kids
Right.
and bringing them to the school.
So within that mile, for instance, for elementary kids, or within a mile and a half for middle school kids, if there are hazards to pedestrians, especially considering their age and maturity and cognitive ability, the school district will transport those students to school. So where this becomes a problem is that Florida statute sets a parameter, a limit for hazardous walking conditions that's set out at 2 miles, but the criteria is so absurd
Yes.
that it's very hard to satisfy that criteria.
Right.
So in other words, if you read the criteria, I would refer to the listeners to 1006.23 in Florida statutes. Read it, see if you can understand it. You're going to have to read it 2 or 3 times. But once you understand it, ask yourself this: is that the limit of what constitutes a hazard for an elementary school student? Is it the limit of what constitutes a hazard for a middle school student? And I think you'll find that the answer to that question is no. But in the meantime, here in Escambia County, we have to make sure that we're taking care of business regardless of what 1006.23 says. We know, in terms of our own common sense, what's safe and what's not safe, what's good for kids and what's not good for kids. That's a fundamental issue. It's a core issue. It's something that should happen just as a matter of course.
Yes.
So whether we're talking about a new development or an existing development, it is incumbent upon our political leaders to make sure that all of those infrastructure needs have been met, are being met, and are met in the future. So they need a master plan to make sure that all of that is taken care of, and that there aren't any compromises in terms of the dedication to funding or resources necessary to get that done.
That's right. And Rob, and I'll tell you that most of this we're not reimbursed from the state within 2 miles.
Right.
So this is something that we're having to absorb here in Escambia County with our budget.
Well, that's the
yes.
problem. That's the problem. So where does that money come from? So it costs money to put school buses on the road to transport those children around hazards that we've identified, some that fall within the 1006.23 criteria and others that we've identified that don't fall within that criteria but are nonetheless dangerous. That money that it costs to transport those students, to hire the employees, to build all this support apparatus, is money that could be spent in the classroom,
That's true.
but isn't, because the state of Florida has not seen fit to make sure that it covers it. Now, federal government, state government mandate that students attend school. Everybody knows that lack of transportation or the lack of a safe route to school is a barrier to education. So when we put that sort of an encumbrance on our students, it does have an adverse impact on their education.
I've got a question here. What I hear you saying is, if the county cannot put money to put complete sidewalks to and from a school, and you mentioned Beulah Middle School,
Yeah, Beulah Middle School.
then the school district, in lieu of those sidewalks,
Right.
then starts busing students
Yes.
because of the common sense safety factor.
Right.
So it sounds like the burden, the financial burden for these sidewalks has been shifted from the county's infrastructure funding to the school district.
Yes.
And
Yeah,
is that a fair
that's
statement?
a fair statement.
And it also increases the car rider lines too.
Not to mention the
Yeah.
traffic with all
The
the extra
traffic.
buses.
But there's another element to that, and that is that busing then becomes a recurring cost whereas repairing the infrastructure becomes a one-time cost.
One-time cost.
So you make an investment in the infrastructure, and you can reduce all of these unnecessary recurring costs that, as I said, are bleeding resources out of the classroom.
So how do, is there a priority list within the county or the school district that is given to Florida Department of Transportation for their share of sidewalk funding?
Yeah, so we've identified a list of several dozen specific segments that are in dire need of work, and but we don't run the transportation
No.
system or the Department of Transportation. Yeah. We don't run the county government where we can say you have to allocate so many dollars to improving this infrastructure. We're limited to our ability to identify and articulate these segments. Now, let me say this too. Yes, we have identified many segments, and the appropriate jurisdictions are aware of what those segments are. But I believe that it's not incumbent upon the school district or on the citizens or on anybody else to lobby for adequate infrastructure. That is an inherent responsibility of government. And so I know that we are divided in terms of a number of different priorities. So we have to figure out what our core responsibilities are, satisfy those, and then where we can fit in other special projects, other special programs, then those come next.
So, so the school district then has a priority list. These are well known. I suppose you give them to our elected representatives at the commission, who then forward them to FDOT as the county's request. Is that how it works?
We've identified segments for FDOT, Florida Department of Transportation. Some they agree with, some they don't agree with. We've also forwarded to the county, and so they know what those hot segments are. This is not a question of whether or not Public Works Department is going to do a job. They're going to do as much of a job as they have money budgeted to them. So this is really an issue for people in political office to develop the political will.
Kevin, now I noticed on one of your slides you had a map of the state. I guess those were the FDOT districts, and in the words you had on that slide caught my attention. It talked about proposals being forwarded and proposals being approved, and it looked like, in bureaucrat terms, there was a large delta, there was a large difference. I guess that reflects FDOT's available funding, priorities within the state's things, but talk a little bit about how these proposals going forward and what the results have come back to be.
Well, I think right now, didn't they cut the funding for that, right?
We'll put your slide
Yeah.
up here
Yeah,
so we can
Yeah.
see exactly what this is, what you've identified here.
Yeah, we've identified what we believe are 1006.23 type segments for the Florida Department of Transportation. They didn't agree with some, but we're
Right.
still working through an appeal on that. So that's not a done deal yet, but we're working through that. The trick will be getting the work actually completed. But of a more urgent and regular nature is the fact that we still have a lot of segments here in Escambia County that fall within the Escambia County jurisdiction that we just need to make a priority.
Yeah. Now, one thing I was going to say, though, the issues I'm bringing up in this PowerPoint, that's where the developers have to put the sidewalks in. Okay, so it's not contingent on whether the county has money. So my solution on that is to bank that sidewalk money from that developer, and then go to a school like Beulah Middle School where there's no sidewalks on Rebel Road or some of the other roads near it, and start branching out from the school that way. And it goes the same way down at the Bailey area or wherever. So that way we're not putting these sidewalks that are sidewalks in nowhere, that you can utilize the money that's going to come from the developers. The other issue you're talking about is the problem of having funding for any kind of project that's submitted to the state or county, whether it's funding in the budget from lost funds or whatever. And right now, it does not seem like there's a lot of funds available for that matter. But
Now, the local option sales tax, when the voters voted on it, I guess those are 10-year term. I mean, they vote on it for a period of 10 years. And I was listening to the city council discussion last night, and one of the council persons brought up this idea that the voters did not vote for economic development in using this local option sales tax, and I'm assuming that was correct. I'm not altogether sure, but the question was using. How do you spend this local option sales tax money? Is it truly dedicated for infrastructure, or can it be used on a variety of priorities?
Well, we have a 1/2 penny sales tax too,
Right.
but ours has to be spent as per the referendum. So we have a committee that overlooks the projects. So that's how Beulah Middle was built. That's how Kingsville was built. That's how life cycle repairs are done for roofs and everything else. So our 1/2 penny is spent for its purposes in school district. I don't know with the county.
I don't know what the LOST
how the
parameters are for the
referendum-
county. But what I would say is that whether we're talking about LOST dollars or general fund dollars, these are things that need to be taken care of as a matter of course on an ongoing basis. So whether you get it out of LOST dollars or out of general fund dollars, something needs to be done in terms of creating that master plan and make sure the master plan remains funded.
Kevin, you are accountable to the voters in District 1
Yes, sir.
for school board issues,
Right.
things relating to the education of the children in District 1. What are the voters, the people you get out, you say you get out and like to knock on doors, what are they telling you about sidewalks and the safety and the blessing?
Besides get off my porch.
Yes.
Right.
But they're concerned. I mean, everybody's concerned about the rapid growth in my district, because the growth is ahead of the infrastructure. So we don't have those sidewalks. And even 9 Mile Road, the FDOT approved a traffic light there at Rebel Road in 9 Mile, and I found out the other day there's no funding. There's no funding for that intersection. There's no funding for a crosswalk. There's no funding for anything. So we need to make this a higher priority to keep our kids safe, to get just a basic infrastructure so a child that lives just a couple hundred yards from the school can get on a bicycle and ride to school safely without being endangered.
Yeah, when you look at social media across a variety of groups and pages and individuals, one thing that pops out is that the pedestrians are not generally safe. And where I see a lot of pedestrians and bicyclists are in these low-income areas
Yeah.
where people don't have a driver's license,
Right.
had a driver's license suspended, can't get a driver's license, have to go to work, depend on public transportation, depend on bicycle, depend on walking to work or their friends coming to pick them
Right.
up. And these seem to be just me looking around, and I like to use Old Quarry Field Road as an example. These seem to be areas that you would pay real close attention to in the prioritization of sidewalks and pedestrian safety issues. There must be other neighborhoods like that.
And you can think of some of these children that come from impoverished areas. Okay, they may not have somebody that can get them in a car and take them to tutoring or whatever. They require to be able to walk to that school. So it impacts kids different ways. Some of the kids they do have that ride to get them to school. That's where we get in these car rider line complaints about them being too long. So that's why I would like to see a new emphasis to try to increase the walkability of our communities, particularly around schools and the community centers or wherever we need them. Yes, sir.
One other thing that those communities don't have is a strong advocacy voice. They don't have, in a lot of cases, neighborhood associations, homeowner associations, and so forth. So as far as their ability then to access their government leaders through lobbying efforts and so forth, they don't have the same volume of voice out there that so many others do, and that puts them at a disadvantage. So if a government leader is waiting for a citizen to come up and knock on the door or pound the tables or slap the podium and say, "Hey, I need a sidewalk," then there are certain communities around here that will never be served. So that's again why I think it's incumbent upon our leadership to take the initiative to figure out what those areas are and to get those attended to. Now, one other thing that's linked to these low-income areas that you're talking about, John, is the fact that these same pockets of poverty that Mr. Studer's group, his Community Institute identified
it.
are directly linked to our struggling schools.
Right.
So you can take those pockets of poverty, and he's done this, depict it on a map, and you'll see that they are
Yes.
they're co-located with our struggling schools. So after a while, I think we have to figure this out. It's not just about lifting up the people who live in poverty. It's also about improving the conditions in which they live,
Right.
so that they can rise to a different level in terms of their portability and so forth. So that's just something that's severely lacking.
Well, I appreciate you gentlemen coming in and helping us understand this a little bit better. I think many of us, as we drive around, we probably don't pay close attention to the sidewalks unless we're out walking on them. And then we notice that in many cases they lead to nowhere. And I'm sure there's other sides of this story. There were people, I'm sure, who can make a case for why it's smart public policy to require developers to put the sidewalks in when they develop the subdivisions. I understand that, and I'd be interested in hearing about that as well. And I think those of you who have experiences on that side of the issue could certainly put comments in to our program here and help us understand that a little bit better. So on behalf of all of us at Escambia Citizens Watch Live, and Teresa Hill here behind the cameras, making everything happen for us, we want to thank you, and feel free to join this conversation at any point you'd like. And if you got any good ideas for us, you know how to find us.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
we appreciate all of your service and look forward to having you in again at some point. So,
My pleasure.
My
so
pleasure.
to everybody watching today or whenever you're going to be watching, thank you for joining with us. We're not finished with Walking Dangerously. We have another upcoming episode here with some gentlemen who will talk to us about how great cities design great sidewalks and pedestrian safety and bicycle safety infrastructure. So stay tuned for that. You'll see more on that coming up here very quickly. On behalf of everybody, once again, John Singley saying, have a great day and evening wherever you may be.